Let's get cracking. Hi, good evening. Content warning for this. There's nothing like really bad, just kind of general. There's like a bit of murder.
Nothing really bad, right?
Yeah, a bit of murder, some inappropriate licking. Okay, so welcome to Yokai 101, which after I submitted the panel I realised was exactly the same title as an online panel that I attended about yokai. So I didn't mean to steal it, it just is a good title. So yeah, maybe you came to Minami and you were like, the heck is a yokai? There's a whole bunch of words that people use for yokai. So the main ones are the kanji characters for attractive, or bewitching, or calamity, because those are synonyms, and kai, which is mystery or wonder. It doesn't have a direct English translation. It's like, when you read it translated, it often comes up as monster, or demon, or spirit, or goblin, but those all have very kind of firm Western associations which don't really transfer over to the Japanese concepts. It's kind of best described as supernatural creatures, but it can also just be supernatural phenomena. It includes ghosts, it includes gods, transformed humans and animals, spirit possession, urban legends, and just weird stuff. So why does the concept of yokai exist at all? Every culture's got weird supernatural creatures. You've got fairies and pixies in the UK, you've got dragons all over the place. America, you've got jackalopes, mothmen. It's generally a way of explaining something that people don't know the real explanation for. It's often also used to get people to try and modify their behaviour in some way, especially if they're women. It's normally by warning or frightening you about something. So, like, I don't know if anyone's parents ever said, oh, if you keep doing that, some horrible monster's going to come and punish you. And also because yokai and other supernatural creatures like them are derived from folkloric tradition, which is usually oral tradition, tales that might not have started off as having any kind of supernatural basis to them get embellished or altered as it passes from person to person. It's a bit like the party game of telephone. So you might get a story about a farmer who kills a dangerous snake, and over time it becomes the tale of a brave samurai defeating a mighty dragon. The changes can stem from misunderstandings, but the embellishments are usually just to make what's probably quite a prosaic story just a bit more interesting and exciting and get it passed on. People just love weird tales. Creatures from a culture's folklore are also a reflection of that culture. In Japan, which is a country that's got a lot of mountains, a lot of forests, but is also an island nation with a lot of coastline, that's a lot of kind of different areas that you can associate the yokai with. I'm going to touch on this a bit more when I go on to like specific yokai and the areas that they are from. But this landscape, the Japanese landscape, means that towns and villages are often quite isolated from each other. So each individual village is going to create their own stories and traditions, and then as communication becomes easier, they kind of start melding and merging into each other. So Michael Dillon Foster, who is one of the premier yokai scholars in the world, in his book, The Book of Yokai, he discusses the impossibility of trying to catalogue yokai, because every single area has their own variations, their own stories, so there's just infinite variations. Okay, so the official, inverted commas, story of how yokai came to be is predominantly told in the origin myths of Japan. I don't know if people here are familiar with the story of Izanami and Izanagi. They were the first two people/gods created, and it was from their offspring that all of the other creatures, people, humans, gods were brought into being. Specifically with the Kojiki, the story, there's a story of Izanami, I think it's, Izanagi is the guy, right? Izanagi washes himself I think it's after something terrible has happened to him, so he washes himself to kind of get rid of the evil influence, and each drop of water that hit the ground, there sprang forth a yokai from it. But it brings into being the kind of difficulty distinguishing between the gods, or the kami, and the yokai. This is something that scholars and historians have been arguing over for literally centuries. Japan's mostly indigenous faith tradition is called Shinto, and Shinto is predominantly an animistic religion, which is, the meaning of that is that everything has its spirit. So this table has a spirit, a rock has a spirit, a mountain has a spirit, the sky has a spirit. The concept of space has a spirit. And that's sometimes kind of translated as to they have gods. But there are also gods in the more kind of traditional way that we would think of a god. The simplified version is that if it gets worshipped, it's a kami. If it doesn't, it's a yokai. However, there are yokai who have been enshrined and are worshipped. So it's not a be-all and end-all explanation, it's just kind of a guideline. So why do we have yokai? So, warnings about dangerous places. That lake's really deep. Kids keep drowning there. Let's make up a story of a kappa that will kill them if they go near it. It keeps them from going there. Warnings about certain types of people, usually women. Also foreigners. Don't go near her. She's an evil mountain witch. Or, I wouldn't go near that foreigner. Might be an Oni. As I said, attempts to modify behaviour. If you do this, you'll get possessed. You also get explanations for unusual phenomena. So mysterious natural phenomena, for example. Now that's a Western picture of a thing that seems to exist in every country and has a million different names. You might know it as the will-o'-the-wisp. You might know it as the ignis fatuus. It's basically when swamp gas floats up and somehow ignites. You get these sort of weird glowing balls above the swamp. In Japan, it's known as kitsune-bi, so the kitsune fire. There's another name for it which I can't remember right now. But yeah, it's things that happen everywhere. Every culture just kind of comes up with their own explanation for it. It also can be used to explain weird behaviour. So if there's a fox that kind of people keep seeing in the village, it's like, well, it's not because you throw away a lot of food. Obviously, it's because that fox is actually a kitsune and it wants to possess one of you. Or it could be just real weird-looking animals. There's a creature called the baku. I'm going to talk about it again a bit later, but it basically looks exactly like a tapir. Tapirs aren't native to Japan, but obviously someone somehow saw a tapir, went, that's a weird-looking thing. That can't be a normal creature. It must be a yokai of some kind. A lot of yokai come under this category. It's like, wouldn't it be weird if this? Wouldn't it be weird if there was a human, but they didn't have a face? they're your little campsite stories, you know. They're designed to just give you a little shock, a little thrill, but there's nothing deeper behind it. There's no big story. It's just like, hey, imagine this. Isn't it a bit scary? Folklore doesn't like women very much. They are written as being threats, or their agency is removed in some way. So it's like, oh, if you've got a woman who's pretty independent, you know, looks after herself, stands up for herself, it's not because she's actually a woman, she's obviously a horrible monster in disguise. Don't go near her. Maybe kill her. Creates a culture of fear, creates a culture of prejudice against foreigners. Obviously, most people will know that Japan was entirely closed off to foreigners for many years. There's also a lot of suspicion of organised religion. I noticed when, doing my research and just generally reading about yokai, that there's an awful lot of yokai that are like called monks, or are kind of associated with Buddhist monks. Now obviously Buddhism was imported into Japan, it wasn't a natively grown religion. And my theory on it is that people were a bit sus of these people coming along and saying, hey, worship this way. So they're like, well, they're a bunch of yokai, let's not trust them. And speaking of imports, with Buddhism came Buddhist law, which, I mean, Buddhism had already been around for a long time at this point. It had a lot of law associated with it, and the monks. A lot of yokai are almost direct kind of imports of Chinese mythical creatures. So the kitsune comes from the Chinese fox, the kirin, or is from the jilin. Chinese culture was seen as very sophisticated, very desirable, and like an awful lot of Japanese culture was imported from China. A lot of architecture of temples, for example, is extremely similar. They took the temples, they took the Buddhism, they took the supernatural creatures, they took the writing style. Like, it's a bit like the Romans with ancient Greeks. They were just like, oh wow, those folks are really cool. Let's do everything the way they do it.
And then
Yes, and then yeah. Man, history is wild. Right, artists filling up space on their scrolls. One of the kind of the golden age of yokai came during the Edo era, which also was when ukiyo-e art or prints became popular. This was like a new method of printing that made art very accessible to people who normally wouldn't have been able to dream of owning any kind of art like this. And one of the most popular subjects for ukiyo-e was the hyakkyakkyo. Hyakkyakkyo translates as the 100 demon night parade, and it's basically just a big old yokai party where they all just parade down the street. This idea still is really popular today. Kyoto has a hyakkyakkyo festival every year, and people dress up as a bunch of yokai and just go parading down the street, and it's really, really cool. I mean, you should look it up. There are some amazing costumes. But people were like, more art, more art, more art. And the artist was like, I've already drawn everything I know about. I'll just make something up. And then you get some artists who were under the influence of other things, like Kawanabe Kyosai, who would get rip-roaring drunk draw a bunch of stuff, wake up in the morning and be like, that's a yokai, that is. And then there's Toriyama Sekien. Toriyama Sekien is, as it says, one of the most significant individuals in yokai studies. He did attempt to catalogue yokai, in as much as it is basically an impossible task. He made a damn good go of it, but he also made up a whole bunch of them. He made them up, or he drew them in weird ways that completely changed how people perceived those yokai. And he was really fond of puns. So there's a number of them that are just like puns on names of his mates. Kind of just being like, you're really lazy. This is a really lazy yokai. It sounds like your name. The range of yokai is colossal. So you get from literally microscopic creatures. These are all like little disease-causing yokai, which is quite interesting when you consider that like microscopes hadn't really been invented at this point. You didn't know about bacteria and viruses and these, genuine tiny organisms that cause disease. They were like, we reckon there's some tiny organisms that cause disease. But you also get the massive ones. So Daidarabochi, who is one of the monks, literally as big as a mountain, or in fact an entire mountain range. You go from the harmless ones, like Zashiki Warashi, who is like just a little household spirit, just hangs out in your home, generally thought to bring good fortune, up to one of the three great evil yokai of Japan, Shuten Doji. One of the other three evil yokai of Japan is Tamamo no Mae, who has a real complicated backstory. It spans centuries, 3 countries. She was involved in the death of emperors. And then there's Shirime. He's got an eyeball in his bum. Literally, that is all he is. You get the ancient ones, so like Chinese imports, like the kitsune, date back, God knows how long, like, again, literally centuries and centuries, but yokai are still being created. Hachishaku-sama was created in 2008, I believe, on the internet. Of course, the internet loves a big lady. And yeah, like the stories continue to be created just because people love to make stories. They love to make them, love to tell them, they love to try and scare each other. Oh, I already talked about this. Yeah, Gods and Monsters, Imported Buddhist Law, The Act of Enshrining. No one can agree. So I mentioned the golden age of yokai during the Edo period. Not only were there developments in printing technology allowing ukiyo-e prints to be much more available to people, but also it was a period of peace. There were no great wars in Japan during this period at all. It was the period when it was shut off to other countries, so everything was kept inside. And because of this, like, arts and non-martial skills became much more valuable than martial skills. This is the period when the samurai basically became irrelevant because there were no wars for them to fight. And because of all these things, like art, stories, everything became much more important. People were creating more, and they were noticing that things were being created more, so they were like, oh, let's make lists of all this stuff. Let's keep it interesting and keep everyone informed about these things. So next I'm going to talk about, I'm ripping through this, some of the most famous yokai. Some of you, well, quite a few of you actually, I recognise a lot of faces. came to the talks that I did on these. I do have those talks available on Google Drive. I can give you the link if you didn't get to see them and you would like to, so just come up to me at the end. I'll take down an email address or something. So the first one would be the Oni. Again, translation doesn't really do it justice. They get called ogres or they get called demons. They're kind of both and they're kind of neither. Like kind of ogre in Western civilization brings to mind like big, hulking, very stupid beings. Demons, on the other hand, are like pure evil and they are in charge of punishment in the Buddhist equivalent of hell. That's because, like so many things, they were kind of imported from China. But Japan kind of took the Oni from Buddhist hell and sort of made it their own thing. So they're in Buddhist hell, but they also live on the mountains. Some of them are in charge of mountains, like Shuten Doji. They are generally associated with punishment, but they can also bring good luck to you. So you may have heard of the Setsubun festival. That's where someone dresses up as an Oni and he goes around all the houses and all the kids throw roasted soybeans at them. Because apparently those are really scary if you're a 7-foot tall red Hulk with horns and a giant club. And you shout, Oni wa soto, futu wa ichi? Fuku, thank you, Nancy. Fuku wa ichi. Except in one town, where they're like, no, we like the Oni. Oni wa ichi, fuku wa ichi. Bring them in, we like them. There's also the Namahage, which are more of a northern Japanese thing. They look a lot like Oni, except they're wearing like the straw raincoats that are very traditional in Japan. The festival and everything is very similar, but they kind of have a bit more of a, I think they come a bit more from the Ainu traditions and have just sort of absorbed the Oni traditions into themselves. And we have the Kitsune. Kitsune literally just means fox. So the fox that's in the back of your garden keeping you up at night, and Tamamo no Mae, the most evil yokai in Japan, same thing. Kitsune usually depicted with 9 tails, but they can have anything from no tail at all right up to 9. There's kind of an idea now that the number of tails is to do with the amount of power that they have. Historically, that wasn't really the case. That's kind of been developed into the folklore. There's a whole bunch of different kinds. There's a whole bunch of different colours. They are all shapeshifters. Classically, they tend to be tricksters. They tend to be quite murdery tricksters. Like they want to trick you into coming somewhere so that they can kill you and eat you. Whereas some of the other trickster yokai just kind of want to have a bit of fun. But somehow the Kitsune also became associated with Inari, who is the god of abundance. So mostly to do with harvest, but businesses are also very keen on Inari worship because they see abundance as being like financial abundance. So you will see a lot of statues of foxes at Inari worshipping shrines. So yeah, they can be anything from practically gods to literally the most evil thing. We have the Yurei. The kanji for that translates as dim spirit. Some people are like, Yurei are not yokai, but again, like the term yokai is so broadly encompassing that, I mean, why the hell can't Yurei be yokai, you know? They're ghosts. Well, they're broadly ghosts. Some of them are ghosts of living people. There are various subtypes. They're mainly associated with vengeance. The one that you probably are thinking of when you think of a yurei is an onryo. The big boom in J-horror in like the late 90s and early 2000s was real keen on onryo. Sadako is an onryo if you don't read the sequel books, where everything gets very complicated. Kayako from The Grudge is an onryo. The living spirit ghost is called an ikiryo. The sort of most common, most famous example of an ikiryo comes from The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu, where a woman becomes so jealous of the wife of Genji that an ikiryo kind of spontaneously forms. She doesn't even know this is happening, this woman, but her ikiryo is attacking the wife of Genji. And it only stops when she's basically exorcised. So our visual depiction of a yurei comes from two things. There was an artist called Maruyama Okyo, and he had a dream of his dead wife, and he painted her, and she has the long dark hair, she has the white kimono, no feet, the sort of like drooping arms. Kabuki and No Theatre were like, that's real cool, we'll take that. They kind of really bigged up the hair, to make it look good from way back in the stalls. And I mean, the hair is also important because the yurei, specifically the onryo, are quite often female. And my theory on this is women were not getting a lot of agency in their lives, so they took it in their deaths. There's also the fact that, women are supposed to be meek and submissive, so the idea of like a really scary, horrible woman is particularly frightening because that's not what they're meant to be like. And the tanuki, this is also a real animal. It is not a raccoon. It is a raccoon dog. They're very similar looking, but they're not the same. They're not even like particularly closely related as species. They just both managed to develop like a little mask. These are also shapeshifters and tricksters. They tend not to be on the murdery side. They just like messing with people. Tanuki are associated with wealth and prosperity because they've got real big balls. The reason for this is as follows. The skin of a tanuki scrotum is incredibly stretchy. And for this reason, it was very popular in making coin purses. And we were like, it's real stretchy, you can put an awful lot of money in here. Should have mentioned balls in the content warning, I'm sorry. So yeah, these little guys, like, if you go to Kyoto, basically every house has one of them outside. They're real common. They're so easy to buy. If you don't know what they are, you must be like, huh? They're sitting on a funny looking stool there. Oh, there's also a really cute story about the one that transforms into a tea kettle, and like this poor guy finds it, and poor guy finds the tanuki, like nurses it back to health because it's been injured, and the tanuki's like, I want to help you back, pay you back. I'm going to transform into a tea kettle, and then you can sell me to the temple, and then I'll transform back and come back, and we can just keep doing that. Unfortunately, he wasn't very good at transforming, and the monks were like, this tea kettle's got a tail. You know what? Let's put it over the fire anyway. Tanuki is like, oh heck, and runs off and goes back to his buddy and is like, I'm really sorry, they tried to cook me. And we got the kappa. The kappa also comes in a lot of forms. This kind of thing, beaked. It's got a beak, it's got a turtle shell, so about the size of a small child. The name literally means river child, but you also have the Kawauso, which is kind of looks a bit more like an otter. You've got the Kawataro, who leaves the water and goes and lives in the mountains in the winter. Like, kappa are one of the most kind of diverse like yokai species that everyone only thinks of in one way. As you can see, they're supposed to be really scary, but Japan was like, let's make it cute. You can defeat a kappa in various ways. So kappa have like a hollow in their head, and it's filled with magic water, which apparently is not affected by the fact that they live in rivers. But they're like unfailingly polite. So if you bow to a kappa, it has to bow back. And when it does that, the water in its magic bowl spills out, and it's like, I have lost all my power and cannot attack you anymore. You can also, well, not defeat, but distract a kappa, because the thing that's tastier than human flesh, right, is cucumbers. Or sometimes melons. But they're really into them. So if you're like, please don't eat me, I have a delicious cucumber, they will take that. And this is why, if you get the little maki roll sushi with the cucumber inside, they're called kappa maki. They are literally named after the kappa. You can challenge them to a sumo tournament. If you win, kappa is defeated. They're really into sumo, despite being the size of children. You can defeat it in a farting competition. Because, yeah, something about kappa and butts. So what they really want is the shirikodama, which is a magical ball that's in your butthole. I don't know why. I don't know if it's magic or it tastes good or what. Only the kappa seem interested in this thing. But yeah, that's what they want. They want your butt ball, but if you can defeat them in a farting competition, all is good. Yokai of the mountains. So one of the most, well, two of the most famous yokai that tend to live in mountains are the tengu. But there's two kinds of tengu. So like the one that's you're probably more familiar with is the one with the really long nose. But there's also the karasu tengu, which is the crow tengu. And they're depicted with beaks, usually black feathered wings. It tends to be kind of depicted as the dai tengu, the nose ones, are like the bosses, and the karasu tengu are the underlings. Tengu are kind of weird. They're very, very formal. They're not really into leaving their mountains and meeting humans very much. They don't tend to kill humans. They more like just, they have wind powers, usually with like a feathered fan, so they can whip up the wind with a feathered fan. So if you're kind of encroaching upon their mountain, they just fan you away. However, they're really knowledgeable, so you get a lot of stories of tengu being teachers, especially in martial arts. You get the yamamba or yamauba, which is the mountain hag or the mountain witch. They are scary women who want to eat you. There's not really much else to say. The kodama, if you've seen Princess Mononoke, you've seen kodama, they're just like little spirits that live in nature, like usually in trees. Like if there's hollows in trees, a lot of little kodama will live in there. That's the ones, yes. They're really cute. The ninmenju is the human-faced tree, which is an example of, hey, what if they're a tree, but the fruit was human faces? And there's the omukade, which is the giant centipede. And when I say giant, it wraps itself around a mountain. That's how big it is. However, it is weak to something in particular. That something in particular is human saliva. Folklore. It's quite a popular boss in like any kind of folklore themed video games set in Japan, which I hate because I do not like centipedes. Yokai of the seas, there's quite a bunch of these. So, Funayure, these are ghosts of people who died and weren't given proper, died at sea and weren't given proper burials. The name is, so these can be defeated. They come along and they try and fill your boat up with water and therefore drown you. You can defeat them because they will ask you for, it's like a ladle that fishermen use, maybe to catch fish with. They'll ask if they can borrow your ladle and then they'll use it to fill up your boat. You can defeat them if you give them a ladle that's got a hole in it. So probably the reason for this is that the word for ladle, which is inada, is slang for fishermen, probably because they did use these things. Umibozo is giant black silhouette of a monk. How they can tell it's a monk, I do not know. Like, there's a lot of these that are like, yeah, that's a monk. I'm like, that just looks like a dude. So they can be bamboozled, very similar to the Funayure. They will also try and sink your ship and drown you. You have to give them a big barrel that's got a hole in it. The Ningyo, Ningyo is a kind of a mermaid. You know, it's a lady fish hybrid thing. Sailors want to find these not because they're sexy or they seem like kind of the mermaids we might be familiar with, but because if you eat their flesh, you can become immortal. If you've ever heard of the Fiji mermaid, which is an artifact that P.T. Barnum, the American fraudster, created, he was inspired by the tales of the Ningyo rather than the tradition. In fact, I don't know if he made it or if he bought it in Japan and brought it back. It's the Ningyo. Pardon?
He
claimed he brought it back, but yeah, probably made it. The Koromodako is just a really, really big purple octopus. Basically a kraken, same thing. The Kunekune, which is a bit of a weird little guy. It's quite modern. Like, a lot of the stories are just kind of, it's this thing that you see in a field, and he's just wacky, waving inflatable arms man. But the sight of it is so horrific, it will drive you insane instantly. But also, the Kunekune is a thing that looks like an octopus but can grow large enough to consume a ship, because folklore can't ever decide on one thing. And then we have the Tomokazuki. This is from Mie Prefecture. This is the divers. So they're usually female, in fact almost exclusively female, and they will dive for scallops. The Tomokazuki is, if you're down there diving, you'll see another diver kind of get a bit closer, you realise it's an exact duplicate of you. She'll offer you, like, to take you to where the best abalone is. Don't follow her because she will drown you. Yokai of the countryside. The Kama-itachi, which I love because he's really cute. It translates as sickle weasel, and he's just okay. So the thing about the Kama-itachi, right? It's invisible, but we know what it looks like. It's a little weasel guy, and he's got like sickles for front paws. If you're out walking by the fields at night, and you look down and your legs are bleeding, you're like, oh, Kamaitachi has been here. Or, alternatively, your legs feel like they've been cut, you look down and they're not bleeding, but then you get ill. Kamaitachi's been here. The Yuki Onna, or the Snow Woman, again, ladies are scary. Usually two guys meet this beautiful woman while they're out in the snow, and they take her back to their house because, you know, it's cold out there and she needs to be protected. Younger guy wakes up, sees her sucking the life out of the older guy, marries her anyway. It's not a good idea. The end. The Sunakake Baba, I just learned about this one. It's an old lady, she throws sand at you. Hey, sand, it gets everywhere! Yeah. Tsuchinoko, that's the one like on the side there because it was the best shape for that. It's like a snake, but it's kind of fat and rectangular. It speaks like a human. It moves by taking its tail in its mouth like an Ouroboros and just rolling. So this is what Japan calls a UMA, an unidentified mysterious animal, basically a cryptid. And people still believe in these. Like, people still go out and hunt them. They have allegedly been found, but what's been found is just deformed snakes. But yeah, I kind of got the idea that I'm sure I read somewhere that, again, eating a tsuchinoko can like confer immortality upon you. I could not figure out where I got that impression from, so I may be wrong. Nurikabe is an invisible wall, but again, we know what it looks like. So if you've ever been working on a project and you just hit a wall and just can't go any further, that's Nurikabe. Traditionally, it's a bit more literal, like you'll be out walking on the streets at night, walking by the fields, and suddenly you just can't go any further. You can't see why, you just cannot progress on that path. Unless, I think, you kick the bottom left corner, like there's a little sensitive spot on it, but obviously you don't know where the bottom left corner is because you can't see it. But supposedly if you do that, it'll go ow and run away. And the Azuki Arai, who is a little goblin creature who washes azuki beans in the river, and you can hear it washing them because it's got like this sieve thing, and it just kind of, you know, puts it in the water, cooks it up, shakes the sieve, the beans move around. Again, I can only assume there was some sort of sound that occurred in the mountains, and people were like, oh, that sounds a bit like when you wash beans. Because there's really nothing else to this little guy. He just washes beans. He doesn't even eat them, he just washes them. So the yokai of the city. Remember, what if human but no face? That's the Noperabo. There's kind of a little bit of a theory with this that living in a big city, you've got so many people that they might as well all just be faceless because you don't interact with them. If you've ever lived in London, you know what that's like. The Nupepo it's like a real short, little, lumpy flesh dude who smells really bad. But if you eat him, he'll confer immortality upon you. Kamakiri is a bit like the Kamaitachi, only he cuts your hair, or it cuts your hair. Again, this is like quite threatening, particularly to women of the era, because hair was very much a status symbol of beauty. So probably it was like, well, don't go around the east areas at night because the Kamakiri lives there and will cut your hair and you won't be beautiful anymore. When actually it's like, don't go around there at night because that's where I like to go and drink my booze. Tofu Kozu, little guy who sells tofu, is apparently a yokai.
It's spoken like bad already.
Because it can burn
some stories say that it is, like it's not poison, but it will make you sick. Others are just like, no, it's just tofu.
So I've got a 50-50 chance.
Yeah, pretty much.
If a super midget appears.
Yeah. I mean, and this picture, he's got two eyes. Like, very often he's depicted with only one eye. This one's got two eyes. I'm like, that is
Was
just...
there like a disabled guy in ancient Kyoto who's on tofu?
Probably, or just like a kid, you know? Because it's like real short. And it's probably, you know, parents going like, oh, can you go and sell the tofu for me? I don't know.
I've had bad tofu before, it's not that bad.
I mean, it doesn't taste of anything anyway. You know? Jinmenken is the human-faced dog. The story with Jinmenken is you see a dog, it's got a human face, and he turns around and goes, leave me alone. The Ashiarai Yashiki, this is one to worry if you're, you know, pretty wealthy, is a giant, hairy, stinky foot that crashes down through your ceiling and goes, wash me! And, yeah, it won't go away until you wash it. So you gotta humble yourself and wash that giant, stinky foot.
What's the tall, skinny one down the side?
Oh, did I? Yeah, thank you. That is the Roku Rokubee. She's a lady with a real long neck.
Okay, don't say.
So, no, Roku Rokubee does like doing a bit of a murder. She will like send her horrible windy neck and her head will come in through your bedroom window and like bite you to death, I guess. There's also a version where the head just comes off and goes flying around on its own. Yokai in your home. The Akaname licks your bathroom. Especially if you don't clean it enough. So yeah, this one is like, you better clean or this gross thing's gonna turn up and do it for you with its tongue. The Tenjoname is basically the same, but it's into ceilings. Makura Gaishi may look really cute, but is an asshole, because what he does is he takes your pillow out from under your head when you're sleeping, puts it at the other end of your bed. Motherfucker, am I right? Like, I'm 41 years old. I wake up with a crick in my neck if I use a pillow. Zoshiki Warashi, who I mentioned earlier, just a little household spirit who just lives like in your closet or wherever. Generally, you want to keep them sweet, so they quite like playing with games, so like you just kind of put a ball or something, a toy, in where you think they live. Because if they leave your house, you will have very bad luck. They aren't making the bad luck, it's just good luck to have them. The Baku, who I mentioned, there's the sort of, I mean, that's a particularly wild-looking Baku. Generally, Baku is just a tapir. But what the Baku does is eats your nightmares. Which, like, yeah, great, right? The thing is, if you have too many nightmares and the Baku is like, oh, no, 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 it starts eating your good dreams as well. So Baku is like good in moderation. The Kainare is, Moku Moku Ren, sorry, I'm not reading my own slides properly. Moku Moku Ren is what if sliding paper screen, but eyes? Kainare is, right, so you know what else is scary other than women? Toilets. There's quite a few toilet yokai. This is one of them. The Kainare is a horrible hand that will just reach up and grab your butt. That picture is actually from a Zelda game. There's one of these in a Zelda game. I don't know which one, I don't play Zelda, but yeah. Majora's Mask, thank you. Yeah, this is particularly like a thing with the Japanese old-fashioned squat-style toilet, which is basically just a hole in the ground. I haven't seen any pictures of them coming out of, like, you know, our Western cistern toilets. Yanari.
I think it might actually be because in traditional Japanese homes they had heating in all the rooms, but they, you know, in specific rooms, but the actual toilet they didn't have heating in, and in the winter lots of people used to die at the toilet.
Ah, thank
So
you.
It was the shock, the going from
Yeah, the shock of
to
the
cold.
temperature difference today I learned. Thank you very much. I mean, also, like, you're just generally vulnerable when you're on the toilet. So, you know, something grabbing you or frightening you when you're there is, you're like, yeah, you don't want that happening. Yanari are like teeny tiny little oni who run around your house and make annoying noises. I'm like, yeah, that sounds like my cat. Except he's not teeny tiny, he's very big.
Yeah, but which one's in charge of the socks?
Probably the Yanari, I reckon. Yeah, I reckon Yanari probably. They're just annoying little guys. They're the ones nicking the sock, the one sock from the pair. And then we have the whole category of Tsukumogami. So Tsukumogami is kind of based in Shinto and animism, in that if an object reaches 100 years old, it develops its own soul. So you've got the kasa obake, which is the umbrella, the like traditional oiled paper umbrella. Seto taisho is made up of like bits of broken pottery, so even if the item is broken, it can still develop a soul. Biwa, bokaboku, that's the biwa, the like Japanese lute instrument. Bakechochin is the lantern. Itan momen is like just an animate bolt of cloth. It flies around, and it's not kind of actively harmful, but you can get tangled up in it. And then there's Boroboroton, which I think I have a note on, but I think I also know the story. This isn't technically Tsukumogami, I think. Just a moment. No. It's a possessed mattress. If you annoy your 100-year-old mattress enough, it will just throw you out of bed. Are you all yokai? Maybe. So, oni are quite frequently associated with outsiders, and there's quite a few theories that the concept of oni came about because someone met a Westerner before they kind of formally, like as a country, met the West, and they were like, oh, this guy's got different skin color to us, possibly red because they were very sunburnt, maybe a bit bigger, and like, oh, that's a bit scary. There's generally a lot of fear of ijin or outsiders. They can be conflated into your characters as perceived differences in skin tone, dress, behavior. And then you get maribito. So maribito are kami, which is kind of like gods, or other supernatural visitors and they come to bring you wealth or fortune or great knowledge. Obviously you want to welcome that, but also sometimes you're like, you're really special. You know who's like you? The gods. Let's sacrifice you. There's a history of outsider murders. Sometimes that's like to protect the local people, so you've got, some great monster who's like, I must have a beautiful girl every 3 years, and you're like, kind of a bit tired of throwing them our beautiful girls. But this blonde chick, right? She's really hot. Bet the horrible monster would like her. Sometimes it's because they are special. They are different and interesting, weird. So there's a practice called hitobashira, and that is when you entomb a person alive as you're building something. A lot of the time this was bridges, but it was also just generally buildings. And like the classic hitobashira story is of people trying to decide who they're going to sacrifice, and then they go to the priestess and they say, well, you know, who should we choose? And she says, go and stand by the bridge, and the first person you see wearing a yellow item of clothing, that's who it's going to be. And this poor Ronin comes by and he's got yellow hakama on, and they're like, ah, right, you. On the subject of Oni as well, from the Meiji era, they became associated with war, and there were a lot of kind of propaganda pictures depicting the other side as Oni. So in the Russo-Japanese War, it was Russian Oni being defeated by Momotaro, who is a Japanese folk hero. During World War II, it was the US and British soldiers who were depicted as Oni, often in political cartoons. As I said before, yokai still coming into being. Tori no Hanako-san, which has been kind of adapted into a current manga series called Tori no Hanako-kun, which gender flips Hanako. She's a ghost who haunts the toilets in schools. It's like usually the third stall, and you knock a certain number of times, you say, Hanako, are you there? And she'll knock back. Broadly, she's supposed to be not benevolent, but not malevolent. Like, she's not trying to kill you like a whole bunch of other toilet yokai are. She's just a ghost, so it's just a bit scary. Kuchisaka Onna, who is the slit-mouthed woman, that legend dates back very concretely to the 1970s. As much as people will try and tell you that, oh no, it's about an Edo-era samurai and his beautiful wife, it's not. This legend came into being in Tokyo in the 1970s. The story is a child meets a woman with a mask on, like a surgical mask, and she says, am I beautiful? And if you say yes, she will take off the mask, and her mouth has been slit right up to the ear on each side, and she says, oh, even like this? If you say no, she just gets mad because you said she wasn't beautiful and stabs you. She can be distracted with candy. She can be distracted if you say, she's like, well, I don't know what to do with that information. But like this was a really big deal. Kids were escorted to schools. Like, they arranged escorts for groups of children to go to and from primary school because everyone was so afraid of the Kuchisaka Onna. Kune Kune, mentioned earlier, legend dates to around 2001. Hachishaku-sama, the 8-foot-tall lady, legend dates to around 2008. And then we've got the Amabie. Amabie's legend dates to 1843, but like she was really obscure. No one had heard of the Amabie. There's a bunch of kind of prophetic yokai, or ones who were like, oh, you know, I'll protect you during this. But someone dug up this yokai legend because she says, if you draw a picture of me, you'll be protected from this upcoming pandemic. Now, I'm sure everyone remembers, we had one of those lately. So Amabie drawings were everywhere in Japan. And it even, made it overseas. Probably one of the most famous yokai now, despite the fact that before 2020, barely anyone had heard of her. where you find yokai in modern Japan, they're still really popular. You get them in capsule machines, sometimes they're tempered. I think I found 3 different capsule machines last time I was in Japan that had like yokai themes. Manhole covers in Japan are very often like quite elaborately carved, usually with things of local interest. Yokai are a very popular subject for that. Shrines, like I said, a lot of yokai are actually enshrined. That's partly because if you've got a really angry yokai or yurei, usually the way to kind of chill them out a bit is to enshrine them and start giving them a bit of a worship. Nanafushigi, so that's like 7 mysteries. This is a thing in a lot of areas of Japan. An area will have its 7 mysteries. And these will be spooky stories or like weird things that have happened, yokai associated with the area. It can be all sorts of things. Like this is quite popular in schools as well. Like a lot of schools will have their own nanafushigi. Excuse me. Turns up fairly often in like anime and games. It's, you know, go and investigate the nanafushigi of this school. And mascots. Japan loves a mascot. My dude, the mountain yam. It's a mountain yam. It's a perfectly normal mountain yam. Yeah. So this one's actually from the game Yokai Watch, which is hella popular in Japan. And like the mascots are around all over the place. Mascots are mysterious creatures, often with magical powers. A hell of a lot of them are like kind of hybrid creatures. So we went to a food festival and they had a bunch of mascots walking around. There was like a little, you were supposed to see how many you could spot and tick them off on the list. And we saw the one that was an eel, but also an airplane. And yeah, like there's a lot of these. They'll be like, oh, I'm a cat, but I've got a melon for a head, and the shape on my belly is the shape of an island. Like, there's none of them are just one thing, except for freaking Kumamon. Love Kumamon. Get out. Sorry, yeah, no, I went to Kumamoto, right? And came away with Kumamon PTSD. He is everywhere. You cannot get away. If you showed me a picture of him before, I'd be like, okay, yeah, it's a mascot. Now I can't. Scared him. Can't deal. What's her name? Chitan, thank you. Chitan. So both Chitan and Mountain Yam Dude, they're unofficial mascots. They're not like licensed by the area or whatever. And that means they can go buck wild. Chitan likes to beat things up with a baseball bat. Really popular on videos for doing that. Chitan is an otter that is also a fairy, I believe. The official mascot is also an otter that is also a fairy, but is nowhere near as popular as Chitan. And yeah, I just love the mountain cat. Who came up with that? And was like, yeah, that's a good thing to have running around children. Okay, I cannot do a panel on yokai and not mention Shigeru Mizukuri. He is a bit like, the modern day Toriyama Sekien. He lived from 1922 to 2015, had an absolutely incredible life, fought in the war, was like very badly injured during it, but would never speak about it afterwards. He created the Showa manga, which is all about the history of Japan during the Showa period, but he also created Gegege no Kitaro, which is just a series that is all about yokai. And much like Toriyama Sekien, he is very influential in the way that we see a lot of yokai today. His designs are like the ones that stick out. His designs are the ones that are often kind of like, you get cardboard cutouts and things running around. They're usually very influenced by Mizuki. Right.
Ever been to his hometown, where he was born?
Sorry?
Ever been to his hometown, where he was born?
No, I haven't.
Because there is
They've got a load of statues,
everywhere.
yeah. They're very, very proud of him, and rightly so, honestly. Okay, that wraps up the panel. Here are my recommendations for if you're interested in this stuff. All of these authors are amazing. Inoue Enryo is actually from early 20th century, I want to say. He was like one of the first yokai scholars. So you had people like Sekien who were kind of cataloguing them. Enryo was the one who was like, well, I don't believe in yokai, but I want to understand why people have created these ideas. So his stuff's like, it's of its era, but it's still quite interesting if you're into that. Everyone else is modern. Michael Dillon Foster is very much on the academic side of things. So some people might find his work a little bit dry, just if you're not used to reading academic texts and footnotes and all that kind of thing. Zach Davison and Matthew Mayer are kind of straddle the line between academic and very, very fun. Matt Alt and Hiroko Yoda, they're the creators of the Yokai Attack, Yurei Attack, and Ninja Attack books, which are all like really good fun. However, they have also done a lot of translation of Japanese scholars' work, so it's worth looking up what they've done, and not just looking at what they've written, but what they've translated. Noriko T. Reader wrote an absolutely incredible book on Oni. Lafcadio Hearn is the Western scholar who went over to Japan and was like, oh my god, these people have amazing stories, I'm going to write them all down. He's the creator of the Kwaidan. Translation. Yumoto Koichi, I think, again, is quite academic, reasonably accessible. I freaking love the Uncanny Japan podcast. Not only is everything that she talks about really interesting, she has a really nice voice. Like, I listen to it in bed and it's just so soothing. Camellia Kyoto Tea House. It's a tea house in Kyoto, but they're really into like just sharing little bits of tidbits of history, folklore, all kinds of things on their social media. And Tuttle Publishing have kind of made themselves the yokai publishers somehow. They do a lot of stuff sort of on Japan, but specifically, like most of the yokai books that I have are published by Tuttle. So thanks very much for coming along. I hope you enjoyed this panel. It's my first time doing it without a script, so I hope I was okay. And yeah, thanks very much. Read about yokai.